conscious business is in fact kind of holistically attempting to be a more conscious organization, which we break up into 3 different pillars. So there's conscious leadership, and that is everyone from the CEO down. So that's looking at how you show up at your company, how aware you are, how conscious you are of who you are in the workspace. We also talk about conscious workplace, which is, just in general, what type of workplace do you have? Do people feel appreciated? Do you have the right employee benefits? Do people have the right, number of days off? Just like general things around workplace and workforce development. And then the final pillar is really your impact on the world.
Welcome to the Strategic Momentum Podcast, the show where we share tips, stories, and advice from progressive leaders on what it takes to break through that business inertia and propel you and your business forward. I'm your host, Connie Steele. There is a continual trend towards companies thinking and operating in a more conscious way. And while there is a desire in many companies to do so, not all are able to fulfill on that promise. But those that do end up taking a more comprehensive approach to delivering a spectrum of positive effects have been proven to outperform the market financially. Meghan French Dunbar is co-founder and CEO of Conscious Company Media, the nation's leading multimedia hub dedicated to purpose-driven businesses and social enterprises. The company's initial product, Conscious Company Magazine, was the first nationally distributed print publication in the U.S. to focus exclusively on sustainable and conscious business practices. Meghan has dedicated her life to using business as a driving force for positive change in the world. And in this episode, she shares her perspective on what the conscious business movement is, what it takes to deliver sustainable benefits for the people and the planet as well as yourself, not just your business, all to help everyone move forward. To start, we'll learn about the winding career journey that introduced her to the concept of business for good and the idea to start her print magazine.
I have a career path that makes absolutely no sense, but in retrospect, I guess it does. It's one of those things that was completely unintentional, but I see how all the pieces fit together. So I went to undergraduate at University of Colorado at Boulder. I did a journalism degree and an English degree and essentially kind of stumbled upon those, not necessarily out of it wanting to be what I wanted to do with my life, but more because I just couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with my undergraduate education. I kind of liked writing. I was pretty decent at it. I liked the creative writing aspect in the English department I was in. And then I kind of just tacked on a journalism degree because I felt like it provided me with some level of legitimacy. And then as I was going through the journalism school, the general message that we got was, yeah, you probably shouldn't go into journalism, which was a frustrating thing to hear. But, they were essentially saying print is dying, magazines are dying, newspapers are dying, and I was doing a news editorial degree. And so kind of with that, I took my 2 degrees. I did what every good undergraduate does who doesn't know what they want to do with their life. And I fled the country. I went to Costa Rica and taught English for a while. And then I came back to Boulder, Colorado, and just had this, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to help. I knew I wanted to do something where I was doing good for the world. That was essentially all I knew. I had watched my parents growing up, and my mom was a pediatric occupational therapist. She still is, and she had a career where she really helped people, and she's been really happy with her career the entire time. And so I knew that when you have a higher purpose to what you do, it kind of can get you through those hard times in your career. And so I just started kind of calling around the nonprofit space in Boulder. When I got back, I found an internship at something called the Boulder County AIDS Project in their development department, and quickly, did a little 5-month internship there, learned all about the nonprofit field. And then that parlayed into a 5-year journey at the Environmental Defense Fund, where I worked in their development department. And EDF is kind of one of the largest environmental nonprofits that people have never heard of. It's a $500 million budget, hundreds of employees around the world. And the thing that they work on is market-based solutions. And I had no idea what this meant when I was, 23 and just starting there. But as one of the programs that they had was something called corporate partnerships, where they were figuring out how to work with McDonald's and Walmart and KKR and, some of the largest corporations in the world to incentivize them on how to be more environmentally sustainable or socially sustainable in some way, and doing that through market-based solutions. And so I just kind of fell in love with this idea that business could be used as a force for good. I always assumed that you would have to stay in the nonprofit world. And so I ended up doing an MBA with Presidio Graduate School in San Francisco. So my MBA was focused on sustainability, sustainable management specifically. And then came back to Boulder and worked at a nonprofit, which is exactly what I didn't want to be doing, but it was the only thing I could find. And then I just had this random opportunity of like a person that I'd met at a conference who offered me a role of coming over and being managing editor of 2 magazines that she was running here in Boulder. And
foreshadowing things to come, huh?
Yes, and kind of going all the way back to my undergrad days where I was like, I guess I'll take this journalism degree out of the garbage and dust it off and see what damage I can do. And I worked at these magazines for 5 months, and literally on a night that I went out to get some pizza with a friend, she had asked me about why there wasn't a business magazine about sustainable business. That exact same night, I actually got fired from my job. The universe kind of telling me that there was potentially maybe something else to do. So I don't know. I was young enough and naive enough and crazy enough and childless enough and all of the things to randomly think that I could do it. And so I embarked on a journey to start a magazine, a print magazine about sustainable business.
Throughout her early career, Meghan demonstrated a desire to help others. This nonlinear, risk-taking career path helped her find her passion for working in environments where businesses could be used as a force for good. But after an unexpected turn of events that left her believing she was unemployable, she went on to start her self-created publication, Conscious Company Magazine. So what drove Meghan to take on that Herculean effort of creating a print magazine in a completely new category?
Yeah, it was just a perfect storm of all sorts of things that when I reflect on it now, at the time, it felt like the world was kind of caving in on me. But that actually became a really wonderful source of strength. One of the stories that I told myself at the time was that I was completely unemployable. I had worked at the nonprofit. After I received my MBA, I had worked at that nonprofit in Boulder for 8 months, and then I had quit to go work at this magazine, and I'd been there for 5 months, and then I got fired. So in a span of 13 months, I'd gone through 2 executive level positions. And at 29 years old, I, convinced myself the sky was falling and that no one was ever going to hire me again. Like I didn't even have a resume that I could take out into the market or anyone would even take seriously. And that actually became, while a stupid story, it was a really great story for me to tell myself at the time in terms of me starting my own business, because I kind of looked around at my options and was like, nobody's going to hire me. I don't know what I'm going to be doing, so I might as well start a business, which again, as I look back on it, I laugh at how kind of naive you have to be to start a business in the first place. And, every entrepreneur you talk to that I've ever spoken to always says the same words. If I knew now what I knew then, or, all that, I wouldn't have done it. And I'm so glad I did. So we had the audacity to believe that we could launch a print magazine. I think one of the things that was helpful in that is that, I had just worked at a print magazine and they had a super, super small team. I, kind of ran the entire thing. So I knew that I could do it if we could just find the funding to get the magazine off the ground. And so we launched a crowdfunding campaign. Our first one actually failed. And then we launched another one. That one got us enough money to get the magazine off the ground. On January 1st, 2015, that thesis that people were hungry for a print magazine about sustainable business proved true, we got the magazine out and it got picked up by every Whole Foods in the United States with our first issue. And so kind of as you ask about bursting into a new kind of category or industry, I did my MBA with a focus on sustainability. I was watching all of these up and coming companies that were really focusing on their purpose. They were, having conscious business practices, and nobody was talking about it at the time. And it was just one of those things where it felt so obvious to me, but nobody else was talking about it. And so that I think that was generally why we thought we could burst into a new category or talk about something different, was because it just felt so obvious to me. There were graduate schools that were popping up around this topic, but no literature or stories about this specific sector.
So you clearly capitalized on, a growing trend, but fundamentally an unmet need that you saw. And obviously, having just gotten your MBA, I'm sure a lot of it was, it's all about aligning sort of needs to solutions. So how do you feel all those early experiences have now shaped your mindset and your approach around business, work, and career? Because certainly you've had some very trying times early on and even building the business out.
Yeah, I don't. It, like I said, kind of in retrospect, it all makes sense on how it all aligned to get me to where I was, where I ended up launching a print magazine about sustainable business after I'd done all these things over kind of a decade to get me to that point. But as I kind of look at what, kind of where I am today, and what those early experiences really brought me was the sense that it doesn't really happen in the way that you expect it to. And like comfort with uncertainty and comfort with ambiguity. And that's the entrepreneur's journey right there. We've been at it for 5 years. We've gone through some crazy ups and downs as a company. We've, almost gone bankrupt. We've gotten acquired. We now have a parent company. I'm now the CEO of a wholly owned subsidiary brand, and I have performance metrics that I have to hit. And I'm becoming there's just so much going on. And even when we put together our 5-year plan for the business at the very beginning, using our new MBA skills, you put together your 5-year plan. Yeah. The idea that where we thought we were going to go versus where we are today is completely and totally different. And so just pulling from those early days, the one huge lesson in it all that's really served me well is that it never goes according to plan. And to really ride the wave, highs and lows of just kind of getting comfortable with nothing happening the way that you think it's going to.
And so it'd be great if you could share with the audience more about your company, what its mission and vision is for the future.
Sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I'm now the CEO of a wholly owned subsidiary brand called Conscious Company Media. Our first product was the magazine that I mentioned. It's called Conscious Company Magazine. It's a business magazine about conscious and sustainable business, and you can find it at every Whole Foods in the nation, Barnes and Noble, natural grocers, major retailers. And so we're working on our 23rd issue of that right now. And it's this wonderful, I look at it as like the fast company for the next generation of businesses. And then from there, shockingly, the print magazine industry is not an easy one to be in. And it is definitely not lucrative or, one where you can really just do a print magazine alone. And so we had to expand into a bunch of other revenue verticals. And so we tacked on events, which is what almost all print media companies do at this point. And so we have something called the Conscious Company Leaders Forum, which brings together leaders of these conscious businesses, kind of having real conversation about what it's really like to run a business like this. We also have the World Changing Women's Summit, which is a female-only space. And so it's for female leaders of conscious businesses. And it's kind of this weird niche within a niche, but it is kind of the fastest growing revenue generating opportunity that we have as a company is really catering to women. And it's the one where we feel like we're making the most impact and the one that our team loves working on the most, which when all of those things align, it's a beautiful thing. So then we also, building off of that, we started bringing all these women together in person. And then people said, we want these stories year round. And so we launched the World Changing Women's podcast. So I'm the host of that, where we aggregate the stories of female founders of mission-driven businesses all around the world. And then we have a whole membership platform where you can come on to our site and for $7 a month, join up and you get access to the print magazine, you get discounts on our events, you get access to all sorts of online content that we produce about sustainable business. And we've created kind of a worldwide membership community where our members can communicate with each other and find each other. You can go and look at our member directory and find people in Washington, D.C. and see who else is interested in conscious and sustainable business, and people meet up. And we also have kind of a monthly business leader Q&A where we invite kind of famous CEOs from around the world to sit down, and for an hour, they'll let our members ask them any questions that they want to ask them. So we kind of do all sorts of stuff, but all of it with the common denominator that it's serving the purpose-driven business space and really helping to tell the stories and support the people who are in that community.
I love that you've created this really interconnected, interrelated media ecosystem, and certainly very different than where you originally started. So to your point of not really knowing where the future could take you and just sort of letting it ride and have faith that whatever comes your way will come together is really, I see how it's all played out.
Exactly.
Necessity, due to a perceived lack of employability, drove Meghan to strike out on her own. Her determination to overcome any obstacle meant she soon built a multifaceted media organization focused on creating conversations about and sharing the stories of the conscious business movement. Her entrepreneurial spirit would prove vital throughout her career as she explored the constantly evolving world of conscious businesses. Meghan explains what the movement is really about, as it is more than what many understand it to be.
It's a huge movement with all sorts of moving parts. And so I can't pretend that I can kind of adequately express everything that's going on, but I can do my best, so most people, when they hear of the conscious business movement, they think of either two things, kind of CSR, corporate social responsibility, or corporate giving programs. And while those are fantastic things that wonderful companies do, they're not what we're talking about with conscious business. And so conscious business is, in fact, kind of holistically attempting to be a more conscious organization, which we break up into three different pillars. So there's conscious leadership, and that is everyone from the CEO down. So that's looking at how you show up at your company, how aware you are, how conscious you are of who you are in the workspace. We also talk about conscious workplace, which is, just in general, what type of workplace do you have? Do people feel appreciated? Do you have the right employee benefits? Do people have the right, number of days off? Just like general things around workplace and workforce development. And then the final pillar is really your impact on the world. And so, looking out what is the why behind your organization and the purpose of your organization in the world. And if it is one and only to make money, then usually that's a good sign to maybe take another look at why you exist as a company, even though that is what good old Milton Friedman told us that businesses exist to do, to maximize shareholder profit. We would argue it is, companies need to have a purpose and a profit. And so the conscious business movement, as that, can mean so many things. There's a lot of different industry groups that have really been pioneering this type of business for a very long time. There's Social Venture Circle, there's Conscious Capitalism, there's the American Sustainable Business Council, there's BSR, there's the International Society of Sustainability Professionals. There's a myriad of industry groups out there that are all talking about this. And then there's also certifying bodies like B Lab, which is a nonprofit that certifies B Corps. So we're a certified B Corp. It's like if you got a certified organic seal on, your food, businesses can now become a certified B Corp, which means they've met a pretty rigorous threshold for being a conscious and sustainable business. And so all of these industry groups, all of these different groups around the world are kind of coming at it generally through, different but similar lenses of how to usher in a new era of business where profit maximization is not the only thing that businesses care about. But there's tons and tons of players. We tried to 2 years ago put out an industry guide that just kind of, with definitions and examples and all the things of we tried to just capture the entire movement in an entire issue of the magazine. We still didn't do it justice. And in terms of trends that I'm seeing, I'm only seeing it growing, and that people are kind of leaving CSR and corporate giving and moving toward this more holistically conscious and sustainable way of doing business.
As Meghan says, the conscious business movement is more than just corporate social responsibility or a corporate giving program. It's a holistic approach that encompasses leadership, workplace environment, and ensuring there's a positive organizational impact. Further, it's an ongoing process that includes an awareness of self, purpose, practice, and relationships. So who is successfully implementing conscious business practices? Meghan gives some examples.
I mean, there's the standards, the pillars that everyone looks to, like Patagonia is just, a fantastic example where almost everything they do is through the lens of sustainability. So there's everything from really, really small companies. Like there's a group called Cafe Momentum down in Dallas, which is one of my favorite examples. A gentleman named Chad Hauser. He was an up-and-coming star chef in the Dallas area. He kind of did this, I think it was something for charity, where he went into a local prison and he was teaching juvenile offenders how to make ice cream, and had this realization while he was working with these guys that they were fantastic up-and-coming guys. They just had a really hard time in life, and most of them just didn't have access to opportunity. And so he ended up leaving his restaurant that he was at. He started his own restaurant now called Cafe Momentum, where they employ people coming out of juvenile detention, and they go through a year-long restaurant training program to provide them with job skills, help them understand all the facets of running a business, specifically restaurant. They do leadership training, they do financial planning, they do social skills and awareness, and it's all through this incredible restaurant called Cafe Momentum. And so his restaurant exists for the purpose of reducing recidivism of the younger population of people going back into prisons in the Dallas area. And the effect that he's had on the Dallas area of just providing juvenile offenders with job opportunities coming out has been staggering. I believe he's reduced the recidivism rate of the population that goes through his program down to 11%. So there's things like Chad and Cafe Momentum, which I always am just he exists, the restaurant exists to serve this need. And then there's all the way up to Eileen Fisher, who we've talked to numerous times, who was running, a $500 million fashion company and had a kind of epiphany multiple years ago that the fashion industry is, number 2 polluting industry in the world, and that she was contributing to that. And so she kind of realized that she wanted her legacy to be to create the most sustainable fashion company that's ever existed. And so she put together something called Vision 2020, where they set out all these incredibly ambitious goals about creating the most sustainable fashion company in the world. And that is what she set out to do. She kind of reoriented the entire company toward that. They now do take-back programs of all of their clothes. When you're done with your Eileen Fisher sweater, you can take it back. They'll figure out how to reuse it or resell it. All of the sourcing and production that they're doing, it's making it so then that is then available to other companies that want to have organic cottons or organic dyes or whatever it might be. And so, and she's holistically sustainable throughout the entire company, looking at leadership, workplace development, impact they're having on the world. And like I said, she's a $500 million company. and she's making those changes. So she's another example. I could, again, go on and on, but that's also why there's a magazine and it tells all these stories. So those are two of my favorites, though.
And she has been a bit of a pioneer where I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, but she is one of the pioneers in obviously that high-end fashion, because she sells very high-end clothing, making people aware that you do need to change fundamentally those industry practices for the sort of the betterment of the world, because many have been all about fast fashion for quite some time, and she's turned that on its head.
Absolutely. Yeah. She's, in the camp that she wants you to buy her clothes and have them last for 20 years. And, you buy one or two staples from her, and it's the exact same thing that Patagonia does. They had that advertisement a couple of years ago, like, do not buy this jacket. And, putting out this message that stop buying so many clothes. Just buy a couple staples, put them in your wardrobe. And that's one of the best things you can do for the environment when it comes to your wardrobe, is just buy less. And that's what she's a huge proponent of.
So to be a conscious business is to employ a business strategy that seeks to benefit both people and the planet. Cafe Momentum has redefined the impact that a restaurant job can have on a young person's life trajectory. Eileen Fisher has reoriented her company and subsequently influenced the broader fashion industry at large on how to successfully implement sustainable practices across every facet of the business, all to have a positive impact on the environment. What both of these organizations share is leadership that is brave enough to scrutinize and restructure all practices from the top down. And while many companies have an intent or desire to deliver on this notion of being a business for good, they face a number of challenges in fulfilling that promise of being a true conscious business.
In general, and I don't like to generalize because I don't know the situation of every company that we're talking to, but as mentioned, most people say conscious or sustainable business and then immediately say, oh, we have a CSR program or we have a corporate giving program. And in terms of kind of what they're getting wrong, when we speak to the leaders of these companies, the reason that most of them say they have a CSR program is because there's a great return on investment there. And when it's coming from a place of we're just trying to increase our ROI, or we're just trying to, kind of, this is for efficiency's sake and us trying to reduce cost of operations in some specific way. And isn't this program great because it's finding, operational inefficiencies or waste that we can be cutting, and they're doing it to make money. That's where there's generally a bit of a disconnect when you're trying to do these, quote, good programs just to make more money. So in general, we kind of say, if the only reason you're doing it, if the only thing that you do as a company and the only purpose you have is profit maximization, and you're tacking on these programs just to make more money, then I generally say that you're not going to see the benefits that we've seen of the companies that are actually doing it from a holistic lens. When you create a conscious workplace, for example, your employee retention goes through the roof. New Belgium Brewery is a fantastic example of this, where they have one of the coolest workplace environments that you could ever imagine. And they have 98% retention rate of their employees. And, there's things like that but they don't create an incredible workplace to retain employees. They create an incredible workplace because it's what they want to do in the world. Their co-founder and former CEO, Kim Jordan, she was a social worker before she started the brewery. And so she said she wanted to create through that social worker lens, she created an incredible workplace for her employees. And the byproduct of that was incredible employee retention and loyal fans and all of these things. But that's not why she was doing it. And so, we just often see people trying to tack this on as a bolt on, and that typically doesn't work.
And what advice would you have for them to really think through how to implement something that is, one, really sustainable? Sometimes, I think they may think, well, it's a one-time program, but something that is fully integrated into the culture and the fabric of the way they operate?
Yeah, it's a good question. Kind of depending on where they are on their life cycle of their company and how big they are and all the things, there's, when you're a small company, it is super easy to kind of reorient the ship. And I'll give our own example. We, as a company, we're very small, teeny tiny little company. And for the first 3 years of our existence, we knew what we put out into the world, but we weren't walking the talk internally. We weren't, we were in full startup mode. We were running 1,000,000 miles an hour, and we weren't practicing conscious leadership. We weren't practicing conscious workplace development. We didn't have a very clear purpose of what we wanted to do in the world with all these efforts that we were putting out. And so at the beginning of 2018, we brought in a consultant, a man named Nathan Havey from Thrive Consulting Group, who I think is the best in the business in helping organizations kind of reorient themselves. And we did a huge workshop. It took 3 days. It was an all-team workshop, and we defined our purpose, which is to redefine success in business in service of all life. We defined our corporate values, and we came up with weekly practices that we do as an organization to keep coming back to the purpose and the values. And so, it's a very simple practice of every Friday, we have our little all-team meeting. And at the end of it, we spend 20 minutes a week, is all it takes. And I ask my team for a high or a low that exemplifies our corporate values and our purpose as an organization. And people can say anything from, one of our corporate values is to choose joy and love. And someone can say, I did something last week that I was really proud of, or I did something last week that I wasn't so proud of. And the entire point is just to kind of listen and give a space for people to talk about what they've done that pertains to our corporate values. And so every single week, we talk about our values and we talk about our purpose as an organization. And it takes 20 minutes and it's super simple, but you could ask any single person on my team what our values are and what our purpose is as an organization. And they'll be able to tell you because we talk about it. It's not, we didn't do the exercise, write it on a poster, laminate it, throw it up on the wall, and then say, that's what we do. We actually try to walk the talk.
In order for a company to truly be a conscious business, it can't be about implementing programs that at the end of the day are done to drive profit maximization. And to build that important element of culture means that everyone in the organization has clarity around the values and purpose of the company and fully embodies these tenets in their behavior. Conscious Company Media's purpose is to redefine success and business in service of all life. So how does that apply to Meghan's perspective on what career success means for herself today?
And I've been doing a lot of thinking about this lately, about what success is to me as a business person. But I would say fundamentally, when as a young person, I was very bought into the traditional narrative of what success looked like in business, which was like predicated on growth. I had this idea that I wanted to run or be at a huge business, or if I started a business, I wanted to do the unicorn thing of, growing a huge business and selling it and doing all the things. And that one of the things that I've learned through this journey is just that some of the smallest or mid-sized businesses that we come across can have the largest impacts. And so I've kind of given up this narrative that I had that bigger is better and growth for growth's sake is the most important thing that you're supposed to do. And so just generally, kind of from positionally where I stand, I feel really good that I work at a small business and that we punch above our weight. And another thing that has shifted for me in the last 5 years really has been, I really, at the beginning of my career, and especially as we very first started the company, the first 2 to 3 years of having Conscious Company Media, I would say that I kind of wore this badge of honor around working myself to death. I was working insane hours and I would brag about it. I would often talk to the people around me about how much I was working and, oh yeah, up at 3 a.m. last night again. And I wore it as a badge of honor how much I was killing myself for my company and for my business. And I find that it's pervasive in our society now that I've stopped doing it. I don't work myself to death anymore. I practice conscious leadership. I turn my computer off at a certain time at night. I don't work on the weekends anymore. I have a very sane schedule as a CEO of an organization. I limit my travel as much as I can. And I'll still go to conferences and, see all my CEO buddies, and I ask people how they're doing, and everyone falls into the same trap of like showing off how terrible your work-life balance is. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that's really shifted for me in the last few years, which I'm so happy about. And when I look at what success looks like for me in my career moving forward, I don't know how it's going to look. I've given up of the idea of trying to figure out how it's going to look, but I know a few things. That the one thing that's super important is that I'm making an impact. Another thing that's super important is that I have autonomy and the ability to work from wherever I want and to work virtually. So I have the flexibility to kind of do whatever I need to be doing. And that I'm making some money. Which is a very privileged position to be coming from. That I don't come from wealth, but I also don't have a lifestyle that makes it so that I have to make heaps of money in order to enjoy it. I have a very simple lifestyle, and that's having an impact and having flexibility with my career, and then hopefully making some money while I do that.
And I think I've seen that just as a general movement across the board for not just those that are maybe younger, starting their career or mid-career, but even later in their career where they realize that having slaved over a job for a long time, it doesn't bring you happiness. If your sole focus is monetary, then you've missed out on some of the other elements, those experiences that ultimately give you peace and fulfillment and satisfaction in your life. So I've seen this shift towards simplicity and let's call it some more fluidity in one's life so that they can have that ability to flex in different ways and even account for some of the uncertainty that you talked about. Because if things are quite rigid and you're solely focused on the one thing, you don't enable yourself to have those opportunities to explore new opportunities that could take you in really serendipitous ways that could maybe lead you to what your end purpose is.
100%. Yeah. I have a very close friend, and she's so stuck on the narrative that she has to make a certain amount of money in order to have the lifestyle that she wants. And so she's working a job that she despises, and she has for 7 years, and she's miserable. And every single time we talk, I just say, like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of making all that money if you're so sad all the time, if you hate what you do? I used to be there. So I understand the trap that we all fall in, but I feel so grateful that just through doing this work that I have kind of been able to let go of that narrative.
As is consistent with many of the newer generation of business leaders, Meghan has placed a high value on work-life balance and no longer perceives working long hours solely for profit as an indicator of success. The traditional view of money equaling success is being left behind, and similarly, she has learned that the biggest company does not always have the most positive impact on the world. This viewpoint has come from her own experiences, as well as some of the best advice she's received throughout her career.
Yeah, I don't even know. I think there's probably like an aggregation of a lot of different advice that I have gotten from a lot of different people along the way. But some of the best advice that I have ever gotten has been, as long as you're still passionate about what you're doing, and that's a really key point to underline, just never, ever, 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 ever quit. I have stared into the abyss so many times with this company and had so many moments where I thought we were going under, and the craziest stuff has happened at the last minute, like various Hail Marys or things that you never would have expected, where I was about to throw in the towel, or I was about to quit, or I was about to walk away. And I knew that I was still doing it for the right reasons. And so I just like hung in there, and we made it through by the skin of our teeth. And so, but the first part of that, the kind of, as long as you're still passionate about it, because I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs drive themselves into the ground for something that, because they're so burnt out, or they have a narrative that they need to keep doing it because they're going to be embarrassed that their company is going to go under, or whatever it might be, whatever that story that it is that you're telling yourself. If there's anything about shame, or worrying about how it's going to look, or worrying about money, or anything along those lines, if it's being done for those reasons, then that the advice doesn't apply. But as long as you're still passionate about what you're doing, just never quit. Life is just too short to do work that you don't care about. You do work in the world that has a positive impact. It's so much easier to go to work, and so much more enjoyable. And then also, that last point of whatever it is in your life that you are trying to do, don't negotiate against yourself. Don't write your story about how things are going to play out without even trying.
And finally, what's the best way listeners can connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on the Twitter at Meg French Dunbar, or you can check out our podcast at WCW Pod, which is World Changing Women's Podcast. And then we also have a fantastic website, consciouscompanymedia.com.
Thanks so much for your time today, for such an inspirational story of really understanding how to be conscious in your business, but also in your life.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for all the work you're doing in the world, getting these stories out there. It is needed and critical and so inspirational. So just thank you.
Being a conscious business requires having a comprehensive philosophy and approach to how you conduct it. It's this ongoing awareness throughout an organization of the company's reason for being and creating value at all levels. Profit maximization can no longer be seen as the primary goal, but rather it's the company's purpose and its impact on the world that takes precedent. And that starts with embodying that behavior at the leadership level, which ultimately permeates your culture. Because when everyone is passionate about your company's why, that in turn will positively propel the organization forward across every dimension. Thanks for listening to the Strategic Momentum Podcast. You can connect with Meghan via Twitter at Meg French Dunbar, or by visiting her company website at Conscious Company Media. And check out her World Changing Women podcast. To get show notes, links, and more tips and advice from this episode, you can visit us at flywheelassociates.com/podcast. And if you've liked what you heard, please share this podcast with others so they too can benefit from Meghan's valuable wisdom and advice. I'm Connie Steele, and you've been listening to the Strategic Momentum Podcast.